In this video, I want to talk through the potential benefits of standing up for your cubing solves. So if you're new to the channel, my name is James. I'm a movement coach specializing in the brain and nervous system, and it's my goal to try and educate people around the physical practices, those to do with your brain and body, that can help your speed cubing in addition to the technical strategies that we are all currently following. And standing up is something that's kind of always been interesting to me, because every time you go to a competition, or every time I go to a competition, I find one person who is standing up for loads of their solves. And a couple of times I've decided to go and strike up a conversation with this person, and the response to why they are doing this is usually along the lines of, I just kind of thought that I would stand up as a joke, and suddenly I noticed my times were actually getting better than when I was sitting down, so then I kept doing it. I have noticed this in myself as well. Back when I was living in London, I would do a lot of cubing on my commute to different places and different jobs, and that usually meant cubing while riding around on the tube. And one of the things that I started to notice over time was, with one-handed solving in particular, my times seemed to be a lot better when I was standing rather than when I was sitting. And what's more, they got even better yet if I was getting off the train and I decided I was going to quickly solve the cube while I was walking. That would be almost my fastest turning that I would ever get. And that got me to thinking about, like, what possible reasons are there that somebody might be better standing versus sitting when they're cubing, given that your hands really shouldn't be affected that much, and neither should your brain. So in this video, I want to suggest a couple of different reasons why standing up may be better for some people. This is something that you are going to have to test. If you test it out and you find out that you are better standing or you are better sitting, it almost doesn't really matter what the reason is. You probably want to spend more time doing the one that makes you better. But this is just for fun, a couple of different suggestions that might help you understand your own body a little bit better, and could even help you make additional physical decisions in your approach to cubing in the future. So first up, let's talk about the table. So I said that cubing standing versus sitting shouldn't really affect your hands, and it shouldn't really affect your brain. I'm going to re-examine that because when we look at things, actually that might not be the case. And the most obvious place to start is going to be around the height of the table, because the dexterity of your hands isn't entirely dictated by the muscles controlling the hands and fingers themselves. There is also going to be a knock-on effect with the hands and the nerves in the upper limbs. Because of the way that muscles and joints intersect, there is always an overlap of the muscles that are crossing from the forearm to the wrist, from the forearm to the upper arm, and even from the shoulder to the chest and spine. And what that means in practice is that cubing all the way up here is not going to be the same as cubing all the way down here. If you look at the videos from the recent World Championships in Seattle, you'll see that quite a lot of cubers at the top level now seem to be aware of this. There was a lot of footage that showed cubers pulling the cube away from the table and almost sitting far enough back in the chair that they could actually have their hands at a more comfortable position for them. And it's not just the muscles in the hands, the nerves can have an impact on this too. So when I'm bending my arms, that is going to place more tension and more stretch on the ulnar nerve, which controls the bottom two fingers. So that's the ring finger and the pinky finger, controlled by the ulnar nerve. As my arm goes a little bit straighter, that is going to pull more tension onto the median nerve, and that's going to deal with these other three fingers. And how much strength or tension is ideal for each of these nerves? Well, that's going to depend on the individual. Depending on your life experience and genetics up to this point, you may actually find that putting a little bit of tension into the ulnar nerve actually wakes up these fingers a little bit more, where somebody else might actually find that debilitating. And what that means for cubing is, for pretty much all cubers, it's probably a good idea to test which kinds of arm positions work best for you? With which positions do you feel like you can turn better and more comfortably? And more importantly, which ones seem to be producing the best times overall? So that's an example of sitting at the table. Obviously, when we stand up, we actually give ourselves the freedom to have more space with our hands. If you benefit from having your hands down lower, that is something you're going to be able to do when you're standing, and that could be one of the reasons why standing might be better for you than other people. So since we're talking about the nerves, let's go for the biggest nerve of them all. Let's actually look at the spinal cord itself. Reason number 2 that your cubing may be better standing up than sitting down is that in the majority of people, standing is going to have a relaxing effect on the spinal cord. So to give you a little idea on how to visualize this, we're going to use this elastic strip as the spinal cord, and we're going to use my spine itself as my spine. So in terms of the anatomy of the spine, the spinal cord does not go directly through the middle of the spine. In fact, it actually sits slightly towards the back. So with that in mind, that means my spinal cord is going right up from my neck all the way down to my pelvis on the back rather than on the front. And what that means is any kind of movement that I perform with my spine is going to have either a stretching or a relaxing, not sure if you can see that, effect onto my spinal cord. So this is pretty exaggerated, but as I curl my spine forwards, the band gets stretched. That is the same for my spinal cord. As I start to arch myself out, the band is going to relax. Same thing with my spinal cord. Any kind of flexion, bending forward of the spine, is going to cause the spinal cord to pull a little bit tighter. Any type of extension is going to cause it to relax a little bit. And just like the nerves in your arms, how much tension in the spinal cord you can tolerate is going to depend a whole lot on your life and genetics up to this point. But there are 2 things here that we know for certain. So number 1, the more tension we put through the spinal cord, eventually we will reach a point where that tension branches out into the nerves in our arms and our legs, and this is going to restrict or reduce their mobility. If the nerves in our arms get reduced mobility, that is going to result in reduced speeds and reduced functionality of the hands. The second thing that we know is that for the majority of people, when we sit down, most of us have a natural tendency to fall into that spinal flexion. With all of that in mind, this could suggest that if your body naturally tends to slump a little bit, you might actually find that standing up and getting that extension through the spinal cord might ease it off, and that could be another reason why your cubing times would get faster. Just like before, this is something that you could test, so go into extreme flexion, go into extreme extension, whether you're standing or sitting, and compare your times and find out which physical posture your body prefers. If you're dealing with postural conditions like scoliosis, it might also be worth testing with some spinal tilt to see if one side actually produces better results than the other. So we've looked at 2 reasons based around the body. Now let's switch it up a little bit. We shall move to the brain. So does it make a difference to your brain whether you are standing up or sitting down? Absolutely it does. And there is one system in particular that it will affect very, very strongly. That system is known as the vestibular system, and it is essentially the part of your brain that makes you dizzy. The vestibular system consists of a couple of little canals that act as almost like spirit levels inside your head, just inside your ear, as well as a couple of sacks of like rocks and crystals that respond to different types of head tilting and movement and acceleration. The vestibular system's job is basically to tell you which way up you are, whether you're moving, and most importantly, whether you're in any danger of falling and hitting the ground. So as you can imagine, when you're sitting down, the vestibular system gets to work a little bit less hard. When you're standing up, just because you're further away from the ground, there's more muscles keeping you upright, there's more chance that you're gonna be kind of swaying around a little bit. The vestibular system is forced to wake up and work a little bit harder. Now, this is the difficult thing when it comes to talking about how much work is going on in the brain. You would think that something having to do less work would always be better. If my vestibular system is working less hard, that should free up more computing power, let's say, so that I can get on with the rest of my tasks. And the harder and harder the vestibular system has to work, the more of the total computing power my brain is taking up just trying to stay balanced and upright, and therefore I'm gonna have less focus and attention for other things. And a lot of the time this is kind of what we see, you know, you try to stand on one foot on a tightrope and solve a Rubik's Cube, you are going to solve much, much slower than when you are sitting down comfortably in a chair. But rather counterintuitively, it turns out that while too much stimulation can be dangerous, too little stimulation can be equally problematic. So when the job being done by the vestibular system is too easy, that means there are less signals traveling from this system to the rest of the brain. And so what should happen is the brain gets a message saying, vestibular system says there's not a whole lot to worry about. It should take that information in a positive manner. It should take it and say, okay, cool, I can start focusing on getting the best time in my soul. But interestingly, if our vestibular system wasn't functioning very well to begin with, the brain actually sees the lack of information coming in as a threat. Falling over is one of the most damaging things that can happen to the brain. If you land and hit your head, that can cause some serious repercussions. So if the brain has any reason to doubt the information coming in from this system, it might treat no information as a sign that this system is not doing its job, rather than there is nothing to worry about. And so what we tend to find across all individuals is that everybody has a sweet spot of exactly how much balance is beneficial to them. For some of you, you might find that even sitting down is overwhelming the vestibular system too much. And if you put yourself in a position where you're in a chair with arms and a large back where you can brace yourself up against it, or maybe even you just lie down on the floor, that your cubing times start to get better because this system requires a very low level of stimulation to be operating effectively. In other people, actually, you'll find that you need to increase the amount of stimulation to the vestibular system in order to get it feeling comfortable. So as well as all of the spine position and arm position, one of the other things that it may be interesting to test is how much of a balance challenge puts you into the best zone for cubing. Practice a couple of solves sitting down, standing up, with your feet together on one foot, maybe lying down on the floor for a completely regressed example, and see if you can find where the sweet spot is for you that gets you the best times overall. And this is one of the things that I suspect in my case was what was going on, as I tend to know that training vestibular and balance exercises tends to make most of my movement better, and would also help to explain why physically moving through space helped me feel like I was solving faster. Okay, so we're nearly there. We've got one more point to cover, and this one's a little less complicated than the others, and that is just the idea of experience. So your brain gets better at exactly the circumstances that it learns in. So for some people, the reason you might find that you're better at solving standing up over sitting down is that you've just practiced it like that a lot more. If your cubing journey began in a school playground where there wasn't many options to sit, or if you find that most of the time when you're cubing it's standing up with people gathered around you, your brain is going to pay attention to all of the specific circumstances around how you learned that skill in the first place. And over the long term, it will start to come to prefer those circumstances over something that is unfamiliar, like sitting down in a chair or at a table. And this is one of the reasons why, if you want to get really good at solves in competitions, it's worth trying to set up your solving station at home under as similar environmental conditions as you're likely to come up against in that competition. If you get really, really good at solving standing up, you're going to be better solving standing up in the future than sitting down. If you get really, really good at solving at a particular time of day, you're going to be better at that time of day than at any other time of day. Specificity is really, really important to the brain's ability to learn and perform, so it's worth making a note and just being aware of how the way you do things normally differ from the way you need to be able to do things when it comes time to perform, like in a competition. So that's about all the time I've got for this video. Let me know what you thought. Do you have any other reasons why standing might be better than sitting? Do you find standing actually works better for you at all in any event? What would you like to see me cover next? Leave all your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.